monthly SCARS Survivor Hour. And of course, joining us on the phone, we have SCARS founder, Debbie Ray Rivers. Debbie, good to have you here. And the good Dr. Hancock sitting across from me. And we are ready. Ladies, welcome once again to the studio.
Hey there.
Hi, Shelley. Thank you. Hi, Dr. Hancock.
Hi.
Welcome everyone to our SCARS Survivor radio show, Survivor Hour radio show. For those who are tuning in for the first time, we always hope we have some first-time listeners. Just going to let you know that Survivor Hour is just another platform for SCARS to spread awareness and to be an advocate and a voice for children who've been sexually molested as well as their affected families. Survivor Hour is an opportunity to help our listeners understand child sexual abuse and the traumatic effects that it can have on children and throughout their teens and throughout their life and affect their families. So I am Debbie. I'm the Executive Director of SCARS. Our charity's mission is to reduce the risk of child sexual abuse in our Bermuda community. I'm also a survivor of child sexual abuse, and I'm a mom of 2 survivors. And our co-host, yes, is Dr. Alicia Hancock, a valued board member, someone I'm grateful to call a friend, a clinical psychologist, very skilled and passionate about healing those who experience trauma. Now, we want to extend our sincere gratitude to the Conduit Foundation for helping make this show possible. Their financial support allows us to continue bringing important information such as this, about our mission and about child sexual abuse prevention. And so, huge shout out to the Conduit Foundation and their unwavering support to SCARS. Now, this show does include sensitive content, and it's meant to help our adult-only listeners, understand the emotional, physical, and psychological scars that we survivors experience as a result of our childhood trauma. And we want our survivors to know that they're not alone. Before we begin this conversation today, we want to offer a gentle reminder to anyone listening who is a survivor of child sexual abuse. Please know your well-being comes first, and taking care of you is what matters most. As we discuss topics like this that may bring up difficult emotions or memories, please practice self-care. If at any point you feel overwhelmed or triggered or emotionally distressed, please give yourself permission to change the radio channel or to walk away, right? Whether you're listening at home, in your car, at work, or in a store that may have the show on, you have the power to pause, to turn off the program, to change the channel, or return when you feel ready. It's very important. Healing is about honoring your needs and recognizing your limits. And please know, it's not a sign of weakness at all. It's actually an act of strength when we take care of ourselves. And I've had to learn that over the years. For many survivors of childhood sexual abuse, memories can remain stored in the past. I know that. Sometimes the mind, I always hear Dr. Hancock say this, like sometimes the mind does what it was designed to do, and it protects. Mm-hmm. And so when a child is abused, that overwhelming emotion of fear, confusion, betrayal, all those things happen when a child is abused. Well, they may become buried. And those buried emotions and those secrets can resurface later in life. Understanding trauma from child sexual abuse, it could also mean that the effects of that trauma, it's not only confined to the moment it happened, right? Mm-hmm. So it could be a sound, a smell, a touch, or even a significant event can waken up those emotions, and it can result in memories coming to the surface. And that's what this show is all about. Dr. Hancock will share what is known about repressed and recovered memories, and she's going to provide us with some examples on how survivors can have freedom and peace and some control over their life when this happens. Now, before we get into this conversation, we just want to remind everyone about our broadcasting rules. That's really important. If you want to call in, you are welcome to. The number here at Power 95 is 292-9595. This is a sensitive topic, as I said. Like when calling into the show, we just ask callers do not mention your name or a perpetrator's name. That's really important, right? This show is not meant for any personal attack. It's meant to educate and empower and advocate for the children of Bermuda and our survivors in our community and for the survivors. If you have a childhood story of sexual abuse, please remember we have no way of confirming your testimony, so you are absolutely invited to come on any of our shows, but that has to be vetted in advance in terms of sharing stories. So, but if you want to come on and ever say you're a survivor, I mean, absolutely. One of the things we haven't been able to accomplish in 15 years is to reduce the stigma and the social stigma, and so we hope that happens one day, and we would never stop anyone from doing that. But if you have a story, and we just need to speak with you before, any names are mentioned. If you want to come on the show, especially our TV show. But if you want to come on and just say I'm a survivor, and we welcome that absolutely. Remember also that we're not legal experts, so we can answer questions about surviving child sexual abuse. I can give a testimony on that, and Dr. Hancock can help with how trauma affects victims of sexual abuse, but we're not the legal experts. So, we're going to ask absolutely no attack if you do come on, no attack on any lawyer, judge, or magistrate. So we really appreciate you respecting these broadcasting rules that SCARS has just shared. Okay, Dr. Hancock, let's talk about, buried memories and what happens when they surface, right?
Yep.
We called it from repression to recovery.
All right.
So can you just begin, Dr. Hancock, by explaining what do these terms mean and what do we understand about them? What can we understand about this repressed memories and recovery from them?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So many people carry these experiences in silence. Repression is a defense mechanism. And so when memories become repressed, it means that the traumatic experiences that the mind has essentially pushed out of conscious awareness. It's not a flaw, but it's a survival strategy. So it's kind of like the brain's way of saying, this is too much to hold right now. And I might not survive. I might not get through this. And so the only thing that the brain knows how to do is to push them back in order to survive and function. Recovered memories they're the same kinds of obviously traumatic memories that surface, but they surface later in life. Sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly. They're often triggered by a person, a place, a sensation, or life event. And I'll give you an example. So imagine that your mind is like a house. A traumatic memory is a room containing something that's overwhelming or frightening, for instance. So repression would be like the house automatically locking the door to that room and hiding the key. The room still exists, obviously, and what's inside may still affect the house indirectly, but you cannot easily enter it or consciously access what's there. Which is, again, what happens to many children. A recovered memory is eventually finding a way to open the door and see what has been in the room. Whether you find it's completely accurate or partially reconstructed, the experience of becoming aware of something that has originally felt inaccessible. So repression is a mechanism. It's a defense mechanism, kind of going back to Freud, Sigmund Freud. And a recovered memory is the person reports becoming aware after a period of not consciously recalling it.
Wow. And how long can a memory be stored in that room? How long? I mean, is there a time frame, or and what causes it maybe to surface? Like, type of an event, an experience? Can you give us
Well,
like some examples?
yeah, so the brain can store memories an entire lifetime. We may not always access all the memories, but and it doesn't mean they're not there. It just means that we don't necessarily access all of them. Long-term memory, for instance, we have short-term and long-term memory. So long-term memory is where, obviously the past gets stored. Recurring things get stored. Short-term recall or short-term memory is, things like that you have access to that you've done immediately, you've done recently, like what you had for
Right.
breakfast. Long-term memory might be something that, ever since I was 5, we have gone to this lake for, the summer. But long-term memory has, for all practical purposes, a virtually unlimited capacity. So what changes in the long-term memory is the accessibility. So the ability to kind of consciously retrieve them. And so things like traumatic memory are kind of durable because of the emotional intensity that it brings. They are encoded in a very intense emotion at the time that it happened. And so that emotional charge attached to them can strengthen the storage, meaning we can remember it clearer, even while making them harder to consciously access in an organized way in order to protect yourself. So a survivor may carry traumatic memory for decades without ever consciously thinking about it and still have it surface with a lot of detail with the right when the right trigger appears.
Right.
And so things like several, events or experiences, as you said, can bring a memory to the surface. So, we have a lot of different life transitions in throughout our development. We go to college, we enter into a relationship, we become a parent. The child, becomes an adult and doesn't need you anymore. But many times when your child becomes the same age as you were when you were abused, that can obviously be a huge trigger and can cause you to parent differently during that time period. And sometimes it can be therapy itself. And I think you and I have talked about, how it did help to heal you over a period of time. Or where you might finally feel safe enough with somebody else to let your walls down. But, sometimes that safety emerges partially because when you have a child, your goal is to protect them. So, the fundamental need to take care of the child and make sure they are okay supersedes the need to break down yourself or do something drastic.
Right.
When another trigger can be, like when you witness someone else's disclosure. So somebody else discloses their own history of abuse. And sometimes, when you hear somebody else's survivor story, it can almost give you permission, not maybe consciously, but it can give your brain permission to unlock it, unlock the door that's been sealed for years. So sometimes it's just simply the
Wow.
brain deciding at any point of stability and safety that now it can begin to process what it couldn't before.
Wow. I've heard that. I've heard that from survivors who said to me when they were sitting in a training room, that they felt like it was okay now to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
It felt okay to open up about their own story. So that really resonated with me.
Yeah, and it's quite complex, when, most of us grow up thinking that a memory, it's like a video, like, a thing that you replay over and over again. It records, it stores, and it plays back. But it's not really how the brain works, especially when it comes to trauma. So, for instance, when you experience something very frightening, the brain's alarm system, in the amygdala part of the brain, the fight or flight, fires intensely, to make you pay attention. And these might be details you don't necessarily want to remember, but the brain forces you to remember because you feel, you're in danger. And this
Right.
disrupts the normal memory consolidation process managed by the hippocampus. So the memory stored, part of the brain that stores a memory is the hippocampus. And it organizes our experiences into a narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So instead of a clean recording, which, those that haven't had any history of sexual abuse, trauma memories, they're stored in fragments. So, going back to how memories are recalled, things like sensory information,
Right.
emotional impressions, body sensations, and, without a clear timeline attached to it. So this is why many survivors can't initially tell you the full story of what happened, but they can feel it, or it can be triggered by a smell or a sound. It's not that it's not a reliable memory. It's just the signature of the trauma in the brain alerting you
Yeah.
back to what happened.
So like a smell would be a particular cologne
Yeah, it
that
could be
perhaps the perpetrator had, or or the smell of alcohol if they were drinking, right,
Correct.
during the time or something, right?
Yeah.
That would be an example of smell.
And actually, it's the most it's funny to mention that, because smell is actually the most powerful memory trigger that we have from a neurological
Wow.
perspective. It's the only sense that has a
Wow.
direct pathway to the brain's emotional and memory centers. So, cologne is a big one. You may smell a particular smell of a cologne. It may not register at first, but your body's going to react to it. As you said, the smell of alcohol, and it can put a survivor right back to the memory.
Wow.
Things like sound. So,
Wow.
the sound, a slammed door, a raised voice, a particular kind of voice, because some people that aren't even
Yeah.
related to you, if say the perpetrator was a family member and you haven't seen that family member, somebody in the community might have a similar style of talking or tone of voice, and that can be a trigger as well, or a specific song that was played.
Yeah.
There also might be
Yeah.
a phrase that the perpetrator used that you hear. And again, it's not going to immediately activate the entire memory. It's just going to immediately activate, hey, something's wrong here, because the brain's protective mechanism is being alerted.
Right. And a survivor might respond to that, not even realizing that they're responding to that, whether it's fear or anger, because they just know something's been triggered, and then their response is just going to be automatic, right?
Yeah, and it's if they if the survivor doesn't take the time to maybe try to understand it, it can actually amplify emotions. It can amplify the response, which is scary.
Yes, because the other person may not know where this is coming from.
Yeah.
Right? The other person on the other side might, especially someone who hasn't shared that they've been abused, they may get their back up or get offended, and they don't even really know where this is coming from, because perhaps, especially for a survivor who hasn't shared. And so the person on the other end might not even know, right?
Yeah. And, so the senses become amplified, or, become very hypersensitive to a lot of the senses. And, and not know why. So for instance, if you're in a relationship and your partner says something, it might be, like I said, it might be a particular phrase, it might be the tone of voice, it might be, they might play a song that they really like, and you all of a sudden have this very intense reaction to it, and you don't know why, but you may scream at them and tell them to shut it off, or don't say that. And for the partner who is just either maybe making conversation about something random, has no idea where that came from.
Yes.
And so...
Yeah. And it's not that it's either one's fault. It's just that, sharing is so important, but being compassionate and empathy for the partner or the person in your life is very important to understand where... This is why we do these shows, is to... is the awareness, right, and the education. I mean, sight, I have here written sight, could be another, warning sign, because we live in a small community, we've said this before, you could see the perpetrator or somebody related to the perpetrator who maybe didn't react responsibly in a grocery store or post office or family event, right? We know that can come to the surface.
Oh,
Right?
yeah. Anybody that like looks like them, or it might be a particular building or type of building that might trigger them. And it didn't even have to be where the abuse happened. It could be that that's where that person, the perpetrator, frequents often. So let's just say the perpetrator frequents at a particular bar, and you go by that bar, and you have a reaction to that bar because you knew of that person going to the bar, or even just drinking. So any bar might even trigger a response.
Right. Right. And thinking about these senses, the five senses, but touch is a huge one when it comes to child sexual abuse, right? A certain type of physical contact, or, a medical exam. I even think about males who have been abused and then are restrained. Say they go down the road of anger, and they really struggled with processing their trauma, and then they start, then they get in trouble, with the law, and then they're restrained because that's what, can you imagine? And then that restraining, whatever
trapped,
they're doing,
right?
that the person is trapped, right?
Yep.
And it can be very triggering. And then, of course, they're just going to overreact because it's a reminder of their, this is why trauma-informed, everybody should be trauma-informed, right? Because even a survivor who then takes their pain out and, does things where they have no other way of showing their pain, and gets in trouble with the law, and then they're restrained, that could be so triggering, go right back to their childhood, and then they overreact.
Yeah, and and again, and it's important to recognize. I mean, obviously they have to do what they have to do, but it's important to recognize that they may not be being intentionally defiant, or trying to get away for the same reasons why they are getting arrested.
Yes, and it's really just a little bit about saying, I'm going to put. I mean, we're not trying to do the job of the police, because I have so much respect for our Bermuda Police Service, but. Just say I'm putting these cuffs on you, and maybe explaining why, I don't know, but it just made me start thinking about survivors who may be triggered when they're being restrained for whatever reason that is, right? And we know that perpetrators start with games, right? Tickling, and they won't let the child get off the lap, wrestling, and holding them down over power and abusing them. So, of course, when that type of activity happens again, they may be triggered from that. That's a touch.
Yeah, because, the brain has to shift from, it being initially interpreted as fun and loving to dangerous. And so then at that point, everything is dangerous. For most survivors, every, level of contact that they're not aware of or prepared for feels triggering.
Yes.
The need for control.
Yes, the need for control, exactly. Even when we think about touch is a medical exam.
Oh, gosh,
one of the big questions, and I know, attending any type of exam would be like, are you feeling safe? Well, of course, when you're, you are, because you're in a safe environment, but soon as someone might touch you in one of your private parts, you may feel unsafe right away. So at that point, when they're asking you, you're safe. When they start the medical exam, you may feel unsafe, but just afraid to say that because you're, touching areas that will be triggered if you were sexually molested, right?
Yeah. And so that's why, again, within the medical profession, every profession that actually has contact with people, one of the tools is talking through what you're doing, what you're getting ready to do. So I'm getting ready to if they're doing a physical exam and near the private parts, I'm getting ready to touch your leg, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is why we're doing this. Yes,
I think we've come a long way with that.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think another question on a questionnaire when it comes to medical is, do you prefer a male or a female?
Yeah.
For your exam.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a center that has different doctors and everything to give the choice. Would you prefer a male or a female? I think that's huge for survivors.
Well,
to have that.
And when you think of the
that
dangers
choice.
of not, like, for survivors, avoiding any kind of medical exam. And so for women, it might be, the pap smear that you need to have every year or two.
Yes.
And for men, it's the prostate exam, right? And so you think of the dangers of not having those on a regular basis as you get older can, be profound, the impact. So
Yes. And can I say this? When, I was sexually abused as an 8-year-old little girl, and so my memories were repressed. And then when I did have to deal with it, so before I was able to have a male doctor. But today, there's no way. Like, Dr. Cousins, huge shout out to you, for PAPS and that type of thing, because it's so important for a survivor to have control over that.
Yeah.
And that may not happen when you're young. You may be able to do that when you're younger and you've repressed the memories, but as you get older, the memories come to the surface, that might change, right?
Yeah, yeah. You as a child, you're not going to be able to articulate or feel like you can or have permission to articulate what you need or what you want to an adult that has power over you, and appropriate power,
Yes.
So, it's a doctor, it's
Yes.
a parent, so.
Yes, and I think as parents, if you have a child who's been sexually abused and harmed, then I think it'd be good for parents to say, do you still want to go to Dr. So-and-so? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
their safety is so important. I don't know if they'll recognize that at the time if they had a male or a female, just to let children know they have some choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel safe with Dr. So-and-so?
Go ahead.
Do you feel... Do you ever feel? Do you feel uncomfortable? Because they may not be able to define safe as much as safe is a very broad word for a child, but in terms of feeling comfortable, they better watch. They know the word comfortable and uncomfortable a lot better.
Yes, helping them understand that. So we've talked about smell, we've talked about sound, we've talked about sight, and touch, even taste. That's another sense, one of the senses, right? That without any warning, it could come to the surface.
Yeah. It could
particular
be
food or drink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It could be something associated with what the perpetrator used to drink or eat all the time, or the way that they. Yeah. So definitely. And taste is something that you feel, but it can be harder to detect the what is this about?
Yes, especially if a perpetrator forced the person that they have victimized to drink, to engage in alcohol or drugs, right?
Correct.
Or alcohol, especially I'm thinking about, right? And then that might be a trigger. I mean, we have learned that when people share their lived experience, it could bring a memory. What helps, or what helps that, and or is there a setback when that happens? Like, what's the difference when a memory comes to the surface? Can you talk about that?
So say that again.
When a memory comes to the surface, as they're sharing their lived experience, could that set back a survivor?
Yeah, for sure.
Or does that really help? Like, what is the difference?
Well, it can be both, right? So, when they can happen simultaneously. So when you hear somebody's story, it can be profoundly validating. It can break through a lot of isolating kind of thinking, like I'm the only one or no one would believe me. But a shared experience is one of the cornerstones of healing. But it can also surface memories, emotions that a person wasn't prepared to face in that particular moment, and so it can be quite scary. It's not a reason to avoid these conversations, and you just don't know. But it's really important to surround them with support, not opinion, not fix it, not question or judge. It's judging them. And if particularly our community is going to hold space to be able to encourage people to disclose, we have to have the resources available. SCARS does, hotlines, referrals, people that can sit down
with
and
Child and
talk to
Family
them.
Services.
Yeah.
Yes, and the healing resources in our community. We're going to talk about that at the end of the show, because we do have amazing resources in our community. And and we'll talk about that.
And I want to be clear on, the idea of setting back, the setback isn't what it sounds like, and it's not permanent. It's not a permanent setback. But what it can do is, it can re-traumatize. It can bring about memories that you thought you forgot about or didn't remember before. And it can cause a very intense emotional reaction to the point where the person wants to flee, they want to run away. But, if you work through it, it doesn't stay like that. So the hard part is just, being able to come in and talk about what happened, and slowly but surely, therapists that are trained will know how to approach things like repressed memories or recovered memories of childhood sexual abuse without jumping in, without, demanding or being curious about, okay, well, what happened next and what happened next, without looking at the signs of the client to see, are they okay, checking in with them. We can pull back, not everything is going to be dealt with in one time, so sometimes you may leave a session and talking about it feeling a little bit uncomfortable, but that's part of the journey. But know that it's not permanent. It's temporary as you work through the trauma. The alternative is that, if you don't work through it, many times survivors report feeling stuck, or they withhold themselves from having experiences that they could have had because they were too scared. But most of the time, it is healing to disclose what you've been through.
Yes. Revealing is healing. I say that all the time. But it's also everybody's choice. We give them that choice, and it's when people are ready. Are there any signs or symptoms that might suggest unresolved trauma exists? Even when someone has no conscious memory of the abuse, right? What could be some of those?
The signs, for sure. So, I think one, without a doubt, the majority of survivors have anxiety that they have experienced since the trauma. And that, so they might feel like they don't understand why they're anxious or why they're depressed. Many times I've heard of emotional numbness. So, many times survivors will report that they really don't feel anything in certain situations, which is not typical. People develop an emotional numbness to avoid something or to protect themselves from something. So, survivors might find they have difficulty trusting other people. They most want a relationship, but they don't know how to navigate it, except with distrust, except with, making assumptions and applying beliefs that are conditioned from the trauma to apply into their relationship with people. Someone that's hypervigilant.
Because if they trust.
Go ahead.
Yes, exactly. Because if they trust, then what if that person lets them down or does something to hurt them, just the way the person in their life when they were little did that? Because all go back. We're going back to 90% of people who sexually harm children are people we know, love, or trust. It's very few are dangerous. They don't come in as a danger, right? So they're someone that children are trusting anyway as little ones.
And it's trusting the other person's motives or ability, but it's also the bigger part, I think, is for survivors is trusting that they actually love them, that they actually want to be with them without there being an ulterior motive because their self-worth has been crushed.
Right.
So there might be this need, this overriding need for reassurance. And that, for some partners that can get very frustrating because of how many times do I have to tell you that I love you and I want to be with you? And the survivor, if they haven't dealt with it, they might struggle themselves because they don't know why. They just don't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And they might not love themselves.
correct.
Right? Some survivors are just really struggling with self-love for whatever reason. We know perpetrators love to blame children, and they're wrong because children do not cause this. But perpetrators like to do that, and so a child who grows up may not feel loved, self-love, and so
which can make it difficult to set boundaries, right? So if you don't have, if your self-worth is very low, your standards might drop. B, you definitely wouldn't maybe trust the other person's judgment of you, so you might always question, you don't, and there's sabotaging in relationships often as well. If there's a pattern of sabotaging in relationships, you got to look at the common denominator, which is yourself, and start, maybe figuring out what you need to do about it, whether it's go to therapy and figure out why I feel like I'm sabotaging all the time, and I have these relationships and I feel like I fall in love and then, it just goes wrong. So they might notice a pattern, but they don't know why.
Right.
And so.
Right. And how can they work through that? What's some of the things that you can help someone with that who, it's getting them to trust again, right? And to, to not think that everybody's.
Well, I think it's important to definitely be in a position where you're comfortable within yourself, where you do feel more confident in yourself. Because when you get into a relationship, one, you don't want to walk into a relationship without considering the fact that it may not work out. We all walk into relationships hoping that it'll work out and hoping it'll be forever. But, if you become very dependent on the relationship filling a void or feeding your self-worth at a high level, then that's an issue. So working through it in therapy, building up your self-worth in your individual self, in your individual life, meaning, what things have you accomplished for yourself in your life that have benefited you, not necessarily benefited other people, but benefited you. Because you also don't want to become somebody that is, as you mentioned in many times in previous sessions, of being a people pleaser, where everybody else's needs are more important than yours. And unfortunately, survivors are notorious for putting their own needs aside because their needs were never met. When they didn't get justice, they didn't get closure, they didn't get help.
Support.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. And how and that, when I'm thinking about that, how can family members and loved ones of survivors, how can we help them respond compassionately when someone begins to recall traumatic experiences or the memory comes to the surface, and then their response has nothing to do with the event, but has to do with, going back to that traumatic experience. How can we help family members and loved ones respond compassionately to this? Because it's hard. Like you're just dealing in the moment. But
well, I think the thing to know is, the individual, whether it's a child or an adult, is not disclosing because they're looking for you to decide for them whether it's true. It's not a true or false question, or it's not a true or false statement. It's their experience, and I've always said, and I say it in my sessions all the time. You cannot decide somebody else's experiences, whether you agree with their perspective or not of what happened. Their experience of you and of what happened is true for them. And so if you try and deny or minimize what they actually experienced, then they're just going to shut down or not trust you. So, believing them is very important. If they're disclosing something like this, erring on the side of that it's likely to be true, because why would somebody, and obviously there are some types of mental illness that, can purposely create a false narrative of what happened in their childhood.
Right.
But for them, but most of the time, the majority of the time, people aren't going to disclose something if it's not something that they experienced and that that happened to them. So,
Right.
And I think, unfortunately, if it's family members, I think the instinct, as we've talked about many times, is, oh, no, like somebody else's experiences of that person may not match another person's experience of that person, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So just because so-and-so
Right.
is in a certain way, in a certain environment, it doesn't mean that that person did not do something to another person.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
unfortunately, the
And
minute that somebody doubts or minimizes or or states their opinion of it rather than supporting them and consoling them, that person's going to shut down.
Yes. Yes. And and when we think about children, if a child doesn't want to talk about their trauma at the time,
Yep.
so a child's been sexually abused, you find out. If a child doesn't want to talk about the trauma at that time,
Mm-hmm.
what should the loved one in that child's life do? Because sometimes, that child or even adults, they don't want to talk about it. It feels like they're reliving it, or it's just way too painful. Will the desire to shut it down cause the memories to repress? I guess, like, will that desire to not want to talk about it, and can that cause the memories to repress? So, what do we do in a situation like that?
Well, so, if a child, and I think I said it, mentioned it earlier, that if you have to gradually introduce, if they've disclosed something, you have to take their lead, right? You have to let them decide what they're comfortable talking about. And the less that you push for detail, i.e. interrogation, which I've talked about before, which is a no-no, then you just, your desire to know and find out is, I think, marked with well-intentioned, right? You're uptight yourself and you want to fix it and figure it out and deal with it right away. But if you force anybody, and particularly a child, to try to talk about, they will shut down. So you got to let them lead. And then let's just say that they disclose one thing that they might remember, or something that's bothering them, and then you see them starting to shut down. You have to kind of say to them, "It's okay. I know this is difficult. I know this is uncomfortable. Maybe another time. But just know that I'm here. It's okay. You can tell
I
me
love
anything.
you.
I love you, and no matter
Yeah.
what has happened to you, I will be there. I will support you. I will protect you." And then you leave it.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is
Yeah.
you're giving the child, who probably, again, has subconsciously lost trust in everybody after trauma, to learn how to trust again. Because you're letting them feel what they're feeling, and allow the feeling in that moment that they feel uncomfortable to heal before they retry.
Right.
But
So, yeah, it does. But when you're a parent, and I know this from experience, like, you just want them healed. Like,
Yes.
you just want them to go talk to somebody, get the healing. And I really realized, and healing, that connection with somebody can be very different if you have two. I had two daughters who were sexually abused, so the healing looked very different for each one.
Yes.
Because children are right, and so we can't force that. Like, to say, just go do this, and then you're going to be better, because it takes time, right?
Yeah.
And
it's very, very hard when you know your child, when you find out your child has been sexually abused, for instance. Of course, you want to jump in and put your cape on and protect your child, and you believe it's expected of you. So and it's of course other feelings like shame and guilt and all of that are surfacing as well. So the intensity for the parent is going to be quite high in that moment, and and so it's very important to be able to read yourself and really pay attention to where you're at as you're trying to help a child disclose what you need them to disclose. And that kind of patience factor is very key, because many times there's this rush of getting all the information at once, right? So it's kind of like you're in a lecture at a university and you're trying to keep up with the teacher talking, and you're all the notes you're trying to write. But you can't do it with something like this. So it's important not to actually damage the memory that's there by doing things like filling in gaps, for instance. If the child's having trouble disclosing something, and you think you might know what they want to say, and so you say it for them. If they want to get out of the conversation, they're just going to say yes. So don't fill in the gaps. You don't want to create memories that aren't there. False memories,
but it won't cause their memories. It won't cause their memories to be buried, right? Like at what point you need to say we do need to talk about, because if the child doesn't want to talk about it at 8, and then and they're not ready for counseling and they don't want any. I mean, at some point, do parents what do they do? I mean, this is a real thing, because we don't want their memories to be repressed either.
No,
right?
no. So that's where if the child is struggling to disclose, and and parents aren't always equipped, right? I mean, we tend to kind of expect parents to be everything for their child. Their teacher, their psychologist, their doctor, like everything. And it's well enough to know that it's okay that you don't have all the answers. And, and we as therapists are, bound by confidentiality and discretion, et cetera, and we're trained on how to help people through repressed memories, and, knowing not to force it, not to.
So what advice would you give to a parent or a guardian to help their child who they have discovered has been abused to want to talk to someone like you about, or another psychologist, talk about a traumatic event? What words could a parent or a guardian use?
Well, first and foremost, it's like, it's not your fault. Not any part of it is your fault. The biggest, most important factor, I believe, starts with your tone of voice. The tone of voice is very crucial. And that's where, again, self-awareness is key in terms of how we know when we're getting agitated. What happens to our tone of voice? Does it speed up? It might rise. And so you might not be aware of it, but your child sure is, because remember, they're hypervigilant. They're going to be very sensitive to any slight tone difference and cued in because they had to be. They were conditioned to protect themselves after the trauma. So tone of voice is important. Yeah. So saying essentially, like, essential things are saying things like, it wasn't your fault. It was not, any part of it was your fault.
Yes. Yes.
And you can even, and I think importantly, maybe telling the child, I completely understand that this is uncomfortable, and you may not want to tell me everything right now. But I'm here to help you work through it. Go as slow as you need to. That's probably a very key factor. That might help to reinforce to the parent to be patient. If you tell your child, go as slow as you need to. We'll go at your pace. No one's going to force you to say anything. Because remember, any level of intensity is going to probably push them right back into the trauma of the perpetrator forcing them to do certain things or not say certain things. So you have to be the exact opposite. Another thing you could say is you don't have to be alone. If you feel more comfortable talking to somebody else,
Should someone do if they do begin to experience those memories and those emotions?
Yeah. And so if you do experience them, I think it's important to, have other safety nets for the child and be okay with that, right? We've said that many times, as a parent. Being okay with your child feeling comfortable talking to maybe a particular aunt or a teacher or their big brother or sister, something like that,
Yeah. What if it's an adult, Dr. Hancock? What if it's an adult who begins to experience some memories when they were a child and they realize these emotions are coming from childhood sexual abuse?
I think it's important to say, I can only imagine what you have been experiencing all of this time, and I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. Always know that I'm here if and when you decide to open up about it. Whatever you need, I'm here. Whatever you need, let me know. I'm here.
Yes. Yes.
And I know you can get being supportive and encouraging. I know you will get through this in your time, because it doesn't say, you're not giving the person permission to just push it back down. You're giving them permission to release it, to open up about it by saying those things.
And when they come into an office of a psychologist, the fragments of what they believe, of what they know and what they remember, that's okay if it's only fragments, right?
Well, and that's
if it's
normal.
not a complete story.
That's totally normal. It's very, very normal not to have a whole story. But in therapy, we just put the pieces together to.
I love that.
To formulate something that they can overcome.
Yes. Yes. And what are some examples that really help survivors experience that peace or that self, to get their control back or their freedom, that they need after those memories come to the surface?
If you have the memories pop up for you, just breathe. You don't have to figure everything out in that moment. Don't pressure yourself to immediately make sense of what's surfacing. Like I said, the memories might come in fragments, and with a professional, we can put those together, and things will unfold at their own pace, because we're trained to include the other senses, and that might help to put make the fragments whole. Because a person that's trying to remember is just trying to remember the memory, not necessarily the things that are associated with the memory, like the smells and the places and the
emotion.
Like you've avoided this. Let's figure out why you've avoided it, because you've avoided it for a reason. Maybe it takes you back to a particular something that happened, or something, a particular smell or a sound. Tell somebody safe. Tell somebody that you trust wholeheartedly, that hopefully you've been able to experience somebody in your life that you can say, or at least test. A lot of times survivors will test people, right? They'll give you a little bit to see how you respond before I give you more information, right? So something that's very helpful, incredibly helpful, is keeping a journal.
I love that.
Keeping a journal, because let me tell you, the brain can only handle so much information. And, and so a lot of times what reduces stress is if you write things down, it gives your mind permission to let it go out of your mind, so you don't have to remember it. It's written in the journal. It's written in the journal. And so even if it's a protective measure, for instance, even if it's, it's still up there because you're trying to protect yourself, you don't want to forget it, or you write it in the journal, and you don't have to keep remembering it in every situation to make sure that things don't happen again to you. So
Yeah.
it externalizes what's internal and gives you something, you can bring it to a therapist later when you're ready. And
Yes.
you don't have to like kind of go back
Yes.
on your Rolodex and figure out, oh shoot, I forgot about this and forgot about this, because, many times the ability to recall can be impacted once you've experienced trauma. And,
Yes.
give yourself permission to go slowly. Things like healing, it's not linear. There's no deadline. But the fact that you're addressing it at whatever stage of your life is progress. Just
Yes.
because you don't feel
Yes.
it right away, it doesn't mean that it's not progress.
Yeah. And it also, I would say, healing and recovery doesn't necessarily require remembering every detail.
No, it doesn't. No.
Right?
Nope. Absolutely
mean,
not.
Because I certainly don't. Yeah, it's basically, moving one step at a time.
Yeah.
Right?
Tools, very much things that are used very much regularly are things like yoga and grounding, because basically what you're trying to do is the only way to really retrieve memory is for the body to feel calm, to be able to access, right? When we're tensed up and we're hypervigilant, we don't remember as much. And so the ability to ground yourself by doing things like yoga, there's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule, feeling your feet on the floor, like really just getting in touch with your body can help to calm it down to then be able to recall a lot more.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. Everyone has different experiences, right, Dr. Hancock? And different responses to their trauma.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. This is great information. For me, as a survivor, what I've learned most about healing from my childhood trauma, being sexually molested as an 8-year-old little girl, is really not about trying to relive every painful detail, because honestly, I don't want to go back there. I really don't. And my perpetrator remembered things I didn't even remember. So you don't have to necessarily as an adult, right?
No. So I definitely want to make this clear. The goal of recovering a memory and recovering recovering a repressed memory even is not about holding on to the detail once you've released it. Once you're in the pattern of healing, it is not important to hold on to the memory. That's not the goal, even in therapy, is to just keep talking about the memory. It's the main purpose of recalling the memory is to understand the impact. And the impact is what we're dealing with, what we're trying to heal.
Yes.
Not the details of what happened.
Yes. Yeah, I hope everyone gets that. That's really huge. Because that is what it was for me. It was really exploring the impact of my childhood trauma and understanding how it shaped my life.
Yeah.
and the scars that I carry.
Yeah.
It's about understanding me and my imperfections as a result of my childhood wounds. Mm-hmm. Because I don't recall everything.
Yeah.
But I've learned that, what I need to feel safe is placing boundaries in my life that work for my well-being.
Yeah.
Right? It takes work. It really does. And it's every day. It takes people in our life who love us unconditionally and are patient with us. It takes a conscious effort to ask ourselves, where is my emotional reactions and responses coming from? Where is this coming from? And, for me personally, it's working hard to give the best version of myself to those in my life, but understanding me.
Yep, understanding you and why you do and approach things and relationships and everything the way that you do. And also why and how we make decisions that could be prohibiting us from having the life that we want.
Yes. As we close this session, everyone, let me just say, healing, and Dr. Hancock, I know you are a witness to this. Healing from child sexual abuse is possible.
Oh, absolutely.
It
Yes.
really is. It's a process. My scars are evidence of what I've survived. It's not who I am, and they don't diminish my worth, and nor will they stand in the way of my purpose. And we want the same for all the survivors out there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
If you need a resource for healing, please visit our website, scarsbermuda.com, for Bermuda resources. Go to the tab that says resources. Just click on it, and you'll find a list of counseling services and helplines in our community. It is possible. And to all the loved ones out there who have a survivor in your life, just do everything you can to just support them, right? Don't give up on them. Be patient with them. Respect their boundaries,
Yeah.
Respect their boundaries. I can't say that enough. But everyone, prevention of child sexual abuse does remain our greatest hope for. Our greatest hope for SCARS in Bermuda is the prevention of child sexual abuse, because we really, at SCARS, we want every adult to be trained in prevention so that they can receive the tools to recognize these signs, to intervene early, and to help ensure that fewer children experience the difficult journey from trauma to recovery. And we can do that by educating ourselves. Right, Dr. Hancock?
Yeah, yeah. And you'd be surprised at how much sharing your story, out loud to others can be very, very helpful. And to yourself, and very healing. Very healing.
Yes, yes. So thank you, everyone, for spending the last hour with us. Dr. Hancock, thank you for bringing clarity to this very complex topic, and providing our listening audience with hopefully those of you out there just receive this valuable guidance, and to feel encouraged that healing is possible, and we know that you are. Tell yourself that I am special, I am worthy, and I can heal.